So here's our third and penultimate reflection on this Easter journey we're taking. We looked in our first session about how Jesus' death on the cross reveals God to us. We looked at our last session about how Jesus' death on the cross rescues us. And in our next session coming, we're going to look at how Jesus' death on the cross is the role model for us of how to live. This third one, I want us to reflect on and think about Jesus' death on the cross as how he rules, very particularly how he defeats Satan. See, there's a very real but strange tension for those of us who follow Jesus, or for those of us who are thinking about following, need to live in. A tension that perhaps is not talked about as often in Western churches and Western Christianity as the Bible might encourage us to talk about. It's a tension between knowing and behaving like we are at war against Satan, while at the same time knowing and behaving like Jesus has been totally victorious against Satan. And both those two truths being equally true at the same time. See, we're told in, for example, Ephesians chapter 6, that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but is actually against the devil's schemes. Peter tells us that the devil is like a prowling lion who seeks sly in the undergrowth, dangerous and deadly and seeking to do us harm. We're even told in Revelation 12 that he terrifies like a dragon. So on one side, we're encouraged to recognize that Satan is real, he is active, and he is an enemy with intentions against us. But at the same time, the Bible blazes very clearly the brilliance of Jesus' all-conquering victory through his death over Satan. In that same place, we're told that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but against the devil's schemes. We're also told, this is Ephesians chapter 1, that Jesus is far above all rule and authority, and that all things are under his feet. We're even told in 1 John chapter 3 verse 8 that the very reason that the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. And Romans 16 tells us that Satan is going to be crushed under our feet. So it's a really strange tightrope that we're called to try and walk as followers of Jesus. And as I say, for lots of us in the UK, it's a tightrope perhaps we've not even realised we're trying to balance on. On one side, there's the reality that Satan is real and active and an enemy with intentions against us. And on the other side, there is the equally true reality that Jesus has entirely defeated him and his victory is complete. The New Bible Dictionary said this when I was reading it in preparation, and I found it quite helpful. It says, the witness of the New Testament is clear. Satan is an evil reality, always hostile against God and hostile against God's people, but he is also been entirely defeated through Jesus' death and resurrection, and his defeat will become obvious and complete at the end of the age, end quote. So what I want to do is just share 3 reflections with you, taken from various places in the Bible, and invite you either to reflect on your own, or if you're in a small group, discuss and talk about it together. How do we walk this tightrope between Satan's effect and influence in our world and his total defeat by Jesus? The first reflection is this, is that a partial victory displays Jesus more fully. This tightrope we're called to walk displays Jesus more fully. See, Jesus' victory over Satan seems to be done in a manner to most reveal Jesus' splendour and Jesus' power. See, one of the questions that we need to grapple with in a serious way is the question, why does God allow evil to remain? It's a very complicated, emotive and nuanced question, and the Bible takes it very, very seriously and gives a number of different answers and perspectives on it. One of those perspectives that the Bible steers us towards is to understand that God allows Satan to remain to some extent in our world so that Jesus might be shown more clearly to us, in contrast towards who Satan is. That in some way evil is permitted to remain in our world so that the full extent of Jesus' supremacy is seen by us in contrast to Satan's feebleness and darkness. In that sense, I guess Satan and his works are a little bit about like the jeweller's black velvet cloth that is bought out first, so that when the diamond ring or earring is placed on it, the brilliance and beauty of that diamond is more clearly seen to us, contrasted against the black velvet cloth underneath. So it is with Jesus and with Satan, that we see the brilliance of Jesus shine even more brightly against the darkness and the feebleness and the hatred of the devil. And I think this is Jesus' approach in the gospel accounts, the historical accounts of his life, to when he meets demons and evil. That Jesus is so utterly supreme to them that consistently it's just one word or one clause Jesus needs to utter to cause them to be begging and pleading in surrender before him. We're told in Mark chapter 1 that people were amazed at Jesus because he gave orders and the impure spirits obeyed him. By Mark chapter 5, we're told that a whole legion of demons, that's military language for between 3,000 and 6,000 armed soldiers, beg Jesus again and again for mercy because Jesus has simply said to them, "Come out of this man, you impure spirits." See, one of the people who's most helped me think about this is Dr. John Piper, in a lovely little book he wrote called Seeing and Savouring Jesus Christ. This is what he says. He says, "The glory of Christ is seen in his absolute right and power to annihilate or incapacitate Satan and all demons. But the reason Jesus refrains from destroying and disabling them altogether is to manifest more clearly his superior beauty and worth." So that's the first thing I want you to reflect on, that this partial victory, if I'm allowed to call it that, which leaves Satan both active in the world but also says Jesus has fully defeated him, this partial victory is a way in which we see the beauty and brilliance and power of Jesus more fully in contrast to the darkness of Satan. Let me offer a second reflection from the Bible on this partial victory. It's that it's a sacrificial victory which also shows Jesus more fully. See, Jesus' victory over Satan is not through Jesus' strength. Though Jesus was infinitely powerful enough to crush and destroy Satan immediately, he doesn't deploy his strength. He defeats Satan through his sacrifice. See, the writer of the book in the Bible we call Hebrews is able to say this in Hebrews chapter 2 verse 14. He says it's by his death that he might break the power of him who holds the power of death, that is the devil. See, Jesus' victory over Satan is not one of power, though he had all the power necessary to do that, but it's one of sacrifice. That the death of Satan is brought about through the death of Christ. See, Paul talks about this in Colossians chapter 2 verse 15. He says that Jesus has disarmed the powers and authorities and made a public spectacle of them. How? Triumphing over them by the cross. Not through his strength, but through his sacrifice. One of my personal role models and heroes is a man called Dick Lucas, now well into his 90s, and for a long time he served a church called St. Helen's Bishopgate in the centre of London. And he captures this brilliantly in a small commentary he wrote on Colossians. He says this: "These evil spirit powers, these terrorists from hell, are stripped of their weapons. True spiritual freedom was won for all God's people through the cross of Christ." See, Satan is slaughtered not by Jesus' strength, but by Jesus' sacrifice. Satan's weaponry is torn from his hand at Christ's death. So that's the second reflection, that the way Jesus does this shows us the power of his sacrifice, not the power of his strength. And then third and finally, a delayed or a partial victory shows us Jesus more in this life. That the reason God has done this tightrope walk that the Christian needs to follow, where on one side Satan still has influence, a prowling lion with deadly intent, and on the other side is utterly destroyed, is that actually that partial victory helps us to experience more of Jesus. See, though that victory over Satan was won at Jesus' death, a past event, it will not be fully experienced until Jesus' return, a future moment. It's a chap called Mark Meynell, an Englishman, but for a long time he was principal of Kampala Bible College in Uganda. And this is what he says in a little book he wrote called The Cross Examined. He says, Satan's decisive and total defeat was achieved at the cross. His demise is guaranteed. In the meantime, however, he strives and he struggles, refusing to accept the inevitable and determined to cause us as much damage as he can. See, this is the tension we live in, isn't it? Satan is defeated. He has been dealt a certain fatal death wound. And yet at the same time, he still wildly swings his blunted mace at all those who are trying to follow Jesus. But these final slashes from Satan are only a delayed reality. He will be ultimately crushed by Jesus. He stands no chance against Jesus' sacrifice and strength. Jesus is totally supreme. In fact, towards the end of Revelation, the last book of the Bible, we're told that Jesus will hurl him down and throw him into a lake of burning sulfur. But until that moment, we walk that tightrope. What does it mean to be a Jesus follower who both recognizes the influence of Satan in the world as a prowling lion, as uncomfortable as that might make us feel, and lives in the certain reality that Christ, in absolute supremacy, has defeated Satan? I think it shows us, one, more of who Jesus is, contrasted against Satan, than we'd ever see if Satan was eradicated from our world immediately. That two, it shows us Jesus' sacrifice is his true strength over all things. And it shows us three, a certain hope of a moment in the future when Jesus will crush all of Satan and evil forever. So I'm inviting you to reflect on and discuss a little bit in your small group.